All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing okay in these tough conditions. Shahid has lost his bandwidth, so he asked me to do the introduction, and he will be looking at the recorded presentation later on. So we were all wondering when the bandwidth was going to give out, and now Shahid knows when. So thank you, Ren, for um, joining us. This is not the ideal situation to give a presentation, but we appreciate your willingness to work with the situation that we have at hand. So, welcome everyone. Ren Cabral is coming to us from the University of California, Santa Barbara. He works in quantitative ecology, particularly related to fisheries, and applies all sorts of interesting methods from complexity science and network theory and agent-based modeling to problems in conservation biology. So I will not take up any more time. I will mute myself and turn it over to you, Ren.
Thanks, Ruth, and thank you everyone for making it to my presentation. And pardon me in advance if ever there will be technical difficulties, but I hope my presentation will run smoothly. Um, so I'm Reniel Cabral. I'm a research faculty at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And the title of my presentation is Innovations for Fisheries and Conservation Solutions. I'd like to spend the next 2 slides um, introducing myself. I do basic and policy relevant research that focuses on fisheries management and conservation. I work with fishers, coastal communities, NGOs, and governments. These are some of the pictures that I have on the field. One is the Indonesia in 2017. We worked with the Minister of Indonesia. She's the one at the center on reforming Indonesia's fisheries. I also worked on 2018 or gave a presentation on strategies to addressing illegal fishing at the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, which is it's a cooperation among different countries. And illegal fishing is a big issue in Asia Pacific. And early this year, I gave a presentation at the World Resource Institute where I discussed the effects of climate change in ocean ecosystem economy. And that was attended by several ambassadors from different countries. So I'm a physicist trained as a quantitative ecologist, and the approach that I take in my research are big data analytics, computation, and I also combine ecology and economics in addressing issues in fisheries and conservation. So to start with, my talk will be on what are the science innovations that would help us address two of the biggest problems in the world today, I would argue. One is about overfishing. What are the solutions to overfishing? How can we address overfishing? And the other one is solutions to marine conservation. How can we motivate more conservation actions so that we would achieve, we would protect more biodiversity in the ocean, given the threats that they have experiencing now and in the future, given climate change. And these problems, when addressed, would give us huge benefits. Yet there are some or a lot of bottlenecks in order for us to be able to solve these huge problems. And what I'll be discussing in this talk will be what are some of the innovations that I've been researching in the past few years that would potentially address bottlenecks in these sectors and potentially make fishery recovery as well as biodiversity conservation more feasible in several localities. So this is a work that we've done a few years ago. We assessed the status of more than 4,000 fisheries globally. The x-axis is the relative fish biomass of that fishery. You can think of it as anything above 1 would be, it's a healthy fishery. Anything below 1 will be their biomass is lower than a healthy level. And the y-axis is fishing pressure. Fishing pressure equals 1. That is the desired state. It is the fishing pressure where you can get the sustained amount of fish you can get, the maximum amount of fish you can get without collapsing the stock. it's the maximum sustainable yield. Anything above 1, you're overfishing the fishery. And as you can see, 64% of the fisheries globally are experiencing overfishing, and that's huge. So if we solve overfishing, there are huge benefits associated with that. Globally, you would experience, if you recover all fisheries, you would experience an increase in fish biomass of 619 million metric tons of fish biomass. You would increase catch by per year of 16 million metric tons per year. You would increase profit by $53 billion per year. But despite these huge benefits, you would wonder what prevents communities from taking fisheries reform, given that these are all great benefits. Well, stepping back on the problem, the only way to get to that future is that there is a short-term cost associated with fishery recovery. That is, people needs to reduce their fishing effort, the amount of food that they get from the ocean, in order for the stock to bounce back to a level where it would provide us more food to catch and more fish to catch. And we calculated that on average, recovery will take 10 years. It means that to be at the same level as you are today, you would have to wait 10 years on average for that to bounce back. And that 10 years now, imagine a place in Indonesia where I work. They don't have months nor years to wait for the fisheries to recover. That is, they're highly dependent on fisheries for their subsistence, and that waiting that long prevents them from, or that short-term cost or value of that prevents them from taking conservation actions. So what is striking is that fisheries that are experiencing overfishing are also experiencing high level of illegal fishing. Globally, 20% of the global catch are illegally caught. And these are some of the hotspots of illegal fishing. We have in the Pacific, Indian Ocean. We have in the West Africa and off Argentina, and 30+% of their fisheries are illegally caught. And therefore, I wonder, given that fisheries that are experiencing overfishing are also experiencing high level of illegal fishing, then I wonder, can addressing this illegal fishing be an alternative pathway to fishery recovery? That is, instead of the local communities experiencing the short-term cost, why not give them to illegal fishing? That is, the one that will burden, or the one that will absorb that short-term cost will be the legal fishers rather than the legal fishers. And if this is feasible, then therefore we can make fishery recovery much more feasible for many places. To answer this question, I look into Indonesia. Indonesia loses $4 billion a year to illegal fishing. It is one of the one of the countries that are most impacted by illegal fishing. Lots of illegal fishing happening there. And Indonesian government in late 2014 implemented strong policies against illegal fishing. They banned transshipment at sea because it can hide it's difficult to know where the catches are from, because small boats can catch in many places, then they will just deposit it to bigger boats, and bigger boats will just move out of Indonesia's exclusive economic zones or territorial waters. So they ban it. They ban all foreign fishing boats because most of their illegal fishing comes from foreign fishing vessels, that is, vessels from other countries. And most importantly, they are sinking vessels. So if they caught a fishing vessel illegally fishing within their waters or within their exclusive economic zones, they will sink it. And we know that Indonesia are serious about their policy because they've sunk 542 boats from November 2014 to May 2019. It's just until the statistics just until May 2019 because they changed the minister already during last year. And I'm currently working with the new Ministry of Indonesia, and you can see that they've sunk lots of vessels from Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even China. They sunk 3 boats from China, and you can see the scale of illegal fishing. These are the vessels that are caught. What more, like before the policy was implemented, there must be a lot of illegal fishing happening in Indonesia. So we use government's data to check what's the effect of their policy, or is Indonesia's policy has an effect on both numbers, which fundamentally drives fishing effort within Indonesia. What we found is that before the policy was implemented, there are 4,286 boats, and after, there's just 3,114 boats. Those are big boats, and that's 27% reduction in boat numbers. But if you account for the size of the boats, most of the boats that were reduced, they're big boats, and therefore, in terms of tonnage, 40% of the reduction of vessels, we tallied a 40% reduction by boat by vessel tonnage. So that's a lot of reduction. But of course, that's government's data. As a scientist, we also need to check this with multiple data sets, such that we are confident about the effect of Indonesia's or any policy. Luckily, we have this global fishing watch data. This uses automatic identification system. So each boat has trackers on them, which we call automatic identification system, to avoid traffic collision at sea. So without those trackers, then you would most likely vessels will just collide with each other. And what's good with that is that we use like that's a behavioral data, and we know whether those boats are just transiting or fishing. And Google did a machine learning algorithm to be able to identify fishing boats that are fishing or transiting, and all the lights that you're seeing in this image or this video, they're all fishing events globally, and you can get that information in near real time. So using this data set, we can map vessels from source, which is from one country. Where are they fishing? You can see it's everywhere. Blue lines, blue is the source of the vessel. Red is where they fish. And you can see the Africa and Pacific, it's hotspots of fishing. And there are a lot of international fishing going on. The size of the circle are unique vessels. So using this data, we also have information on who are the actors and how much fishing hours they are fishing in other areas. China, South Korea, and Taiwan fish over 1 million hours from 2013 to 2016. These are just fishing events, the act of fishing, not including transiting. And the number of exclusive economic zones or countries being fished, China, Taiwan, and South Korea fish in over 50 EEZ or exclusive economic zone. So we have this data. We can use that to assess if there is a difference in fishing pressure in Indonesia before the policy was implemented and after the policy. So before and after analysis. And this is the result. So before the policy, the fishing hours in Indonesia by foreign fishing vessel is around 4,000 hours per month. Then after the policy, there's a more than 90% reduction in fishing effort. And that's despite the fact that globally, fishing effort is increasing. And you can see the effect of their policy from this graph. So rank 1 is the most fished countries by foreign fishing vessel. It's Kiribati. Then less fish at the bottom. Indonesia is around top 13 to 15. Then after the policy, several of the boats, some of them got sunk and the other maybe went elsewhere. And the ranking of Indonesia in terms of being most fished dropped to close to 90 or 80, over 80. So that's really a huge effect. The Indonesia's policies have really huge effect on fishing behavior. So we can also assess what countries are affected by Indonesia's policies. So China used to fish a lot in Indonesia, close to 4,000 hours per month. Then after the policy, it's almost zero. Same for Taiwan, Thailand, and South Korea. So this data set is great, especially for tracking vessels that are large. So x-axis is vessel length, y-axis is number of vessels. As you can see, the black curve is all vessels, while the red curve is the theoretical, that's the number of vessels that they are tracking. And it's not good resolution for small scale vessels, but it's good resolution for larger scale vessels. And that we need to complement this data set, given that we might miss some of the stories there with small scale vessels. And to do that, this is the AAS data for Indonesia just for 3 months, August, September, October 2014. That's Bali. Maybe you've been there before, just for reference. Then we have night light satellite images. So boats emit light at night. They use light to attract fishes, and therefore we can use that to count the number of boats that are fishing before and after the policy is being implemented. And also Indonesia, they have trackers. They track their own vessels, and that's a lot of additional data that we can use to be able to assess what's the effect of that, what's the effect of Indonesia's policies on fishing effort. So this is from nightlight satellite images counting boats at night. When they implement the policy, there's a 35% reduction in boat numbers. But you can see that the story is different. For foreign vessels, they're all zero after the policy. And this one, the effort is increasing in time. So what's happening here is that foreign vessels left Indonesia. So there's lots of opportunity for local vessels to fish more. And under open access, so if you don't have regulations that control fishing effort, meaning fishers can just fish unlimited, and this is what's happening. Local fishers are just increasing their effort because there's opportunity for them to catch more. The same story for vessel monitoring system, short drop, but the local fishing effort increases after the policy. So it seems that the Indonesia's anti-illegal fishing policies reduce foreign fishing within Indonesia, but increase domestic fishing. And we want to know what will be the effect of that to the sustainability of fisheries in Indonesia. What I did is I built a bioeconomic model. I used skipjack tuna as a model species. It's the biggest species or biggest fishery in Indonesia by volume. And bioeconomic model is a biological model. You need to consider the growth rate of the species, the biomass, and the carrying capacity. Economic model is a model of how stakeholders or fishers respond to incentives. So the harvest dynamics, they respond to both the fishing price and fish cost, and they respond to the biological conditions. If there's more biomass in the sea, then therefore they might increase their fishing effort. And policy lever, what are the actions that you are testing? Would you control effort? If you control effort, what would that mean to fishery sustainability and your outputs such as catch and profit? What if you implement market interventions? What if you curb illegal fishing? So this allows us to assess the potential effect of different policies to our ecosystem. So to do this, we first estimate the current status of the fishery. It's important, that's the reference point, and project it forward for 20 years and assess 3 different scenarios. One is open access, that is, what if Indonesia didn't do anything? They didn't curb illegal fishing, yet they also didn't do something about their local effort. Means fishers can just do whatever they want. That's one scenario. The others is they address their illegal fishing, yet what you see, there's a creeping of local fishing effort, and that's a signature of open access fishery. So what will happen to fishery sustainability if that's the case? And the other one is if Indonesia addressed illegal fishing, then they implemented something that would control local fishing effort. What would that mean in their fishery and fishery sustainability? This is the output of that, a 20-year projection. The lower curve under open access, x-axis is year, y-axis is harvest. So if it's just open access, the current catch will be reduced by 59% in 20 years. They've implemented anti-illegal fishing policy, but if they allow their local fisheries to just expand unlimitedly, so addressing illegal fishing plus open access in color cyan, what will happen is they will increase their catch in the short term, but eventually catch will be lower in the future, negative 30% compared to present. If they address illegal fishing and control their fishing effort, that is, they invest in local management, they will get an improvement in catch of 14%, and that improvement can be sustained in the future. It's the same for The story is the same for the Gambia. The Gambia is a country in Africa. They also implement strong policies against illegal fishing. So they ban all foreign fishing vessels in their waters in late 2015. And using the Global Fishing Watch data, we show that fishing effort within the Gambia has been reduced substantially. And I also modeled the effect on the stock, and it's also promising. So we have success stories for Indonesia and the Gambia. What if we address illegal fishing globally, given that illegal fishing is a huge concern and a huge problem globally? So the unfilled circle is the current status of the fishery for several regions. Again, the desired state is fishing pressure equals 1. If we address illegal fishing, you will see that the gap to fisheries through sustainability becomes more narrow or becomes narrower, and fisheries reform and fishery recovery would be much more feasible in many places. So going back to our question, can addressing illegal fishing be an alternative pathway to fishery recovery? Indeed, addressing illegal fishing makes fishery recovery much more feasible. But I have to note that addressing illegal fishing is great. It can kickstart fishery recovery, but also Indonesia should manage their local fishery to have that gain, to get that gain more sustainably. So this is another tool that has been used a lot for maintaining and improving marine biodiversity, which is marine protected areas. It is primarily used for conservation, and there are various types. Some marine protected area allow some form of activities such as fishing, and some protected area, which is the fully protected area, don't allow fishing at all. It is the most, it is what we are, it is, I think, the most effective tool for conserving biodiversity, fully protected area, because there's no fishing allowed within its borders, and therefore you have more control of what's being taken, and what you have more control about the area. So several studies have also shown that marine protected area can also improve fisheries productivity, despite its primarily purpose of or use as a conservation tool. This is the trend of marine protected area globally. X-axis denotes years, y-axis percent of global ocean protected, and we have targets. Several countries had agreed to targets the amount of ocean areas that should be in fully protected areas. In 2020, our target is 10% of the ocean area should be in fully protected area, both by conservation of biological diversity and sustainable development goal. Yet you can see this trend. It's not meeting the target and unlikely to meet the target this year. I have to note that these are all protected area, and fully protected area is just 2.5% this year, and 2.5% is far from 10%. And this year, leaders would meet this October this year. Leaders will meet in China to agree on the 2030 target, and the 2030 target would be most likely 30%, given the various commitments of several countries already. And that the line that I put here, that's an exponential feat of the progress of MPA, like the size of MPA. So that's actually a generous feat for how MPAs would increase in the future. And given that as you put more MPAs, it is difficult to actually put more MPAs, given that you are potentially trading off with other ocean uses, and that it might be a difficult task to actually achieve 30% of the ocean be protected by 2030. And that what really drives that difficulty is the perception that conservation is trading off with food production. That is, the conventional wisdom is that as you protect more ocean areas, you reduce the amount of food available for people to fish. Just this red curve, there are several boats there. or dash lines. There are several boats there. The perception is that those boats will lose jobs, and generally the amount of food that they can bring in, it will be reduced. So the question that I'm interested in addressing is that how can we use science to direct conservation actions towards location where they can simultaneously yield biodiversity protection, improve food security, and economic benefits. So if we can do that, from 2.5%, potentially it's possible to go to 30% if we can design a protected area that can improve, that can get all these benefits in the ocean. And I'm very optimistic given that we have cases locally that marine protected area can improve food production at the local level. Why not we can do it at the global level? More specifically, the question that I want to address would be, can we design a global network of marine protected areas that optimizes food benefits? So to answer that question, I built a model, I parameterize it, and I test scenarios. This is the model. X-axis is stock range, Y-axis is biomass. So in the future, under business as usual, that is, you don't implement any marine protected area, if the fisheries is poorly managed, you would expect less or fewer fish and more boats. Income will be less, catch will be less. If you implement a marine protected area, there could be a buildup of biomass within those MPAs, and fishes will move outside, and potentially fishers would catch more. And that what we are testing here, or what I am testing here, is the catch difference. If you put an MPA, will that improve catch compared to business as usual? The answer can also be negative. And I don't know the answer, if it's positive or negative. And that's where the modeling will come in. So factors affecting catch, the size of the protected area. Imagine if you close the entire fishery, there's no place for fishers to fish. They can't fish on land. Therefore, there are cases where there are optimal sizes of MPAs that would allow you to catch or optimize your catches outside this protected area. And those size of protected area also affects the amount of biomass buildup within the MPA or marine protected area. I also consider carrying capacity. How big is the fishery? Growth rate, both intrinsic and larval contributions. Mobility characteristic, if they don't move a lot or move a lot, that affects the amount of biomass that would go to fishing area. And most importantly, fisheries management. In areas that are well managed now, putting a marine protected area can decrease catch. Means that people already know how to manage their fishery, and that if you close huge areas of the ocean, most likely that would lead to reduced catch. While for areas that are currently overfished and open access, there's huge potential for that to benefit from a marine protected area. And in this model, I recognize that fisheries management has huge role. Just to demonstrate that, this is for open access or poorly managed fishery. Delta H is the catch difference you would get from implementing a protected area. X-axis is MPA size. 1 is the entire range of the species. You close that or turn that into MPA, marine protected area. Then different sizes. M is mobility for certain characteristics of growth rate of the species and capacity. So you can see that for open access or overfished areas, you could see improvements in catches when you implement an MPA. And there's optimal MPA size depending on the range of the species, the mobility, and the growth rate. For a well-managed fishery, such as many in developed countries, when you put an MPA, catch would decline because they're already managing their fisheries well, and therefore putting an MPA may not improve catch. And I recognize that in the model that I built. I considered 1,342 commercially exploited stocks with available catch data and species distribution. So all the species that we considered here have geographic range, so we know where they are, and that's explicitly being modeled here. I generated the first ever carrying capacity map globally. So this is the amount of food that or fish that you could get in any of the places globally. This information is not available currently, and I'm excited that this information can be available and um, hopefully be useful for many other ocean initiatives. You could also parse that carrying capacity into species that are low mobile, moderate mobility, and high mobility. Um, for fisheries management, I need to make sure that to account for stock status. So these are some of the stock assessment boundary, meaning those blobs, they have corresponding status, and those are all accounted for in the model. So if those blobs are well managed, putting an MPA in those blobs would just decline the food provision benefits in those areas, and we accounted for that one. Um, Superposition of all stock assessments or management areas. This is the global map of that one. In the US, lots of species are being managed. And in other parts, there are few species that are being managed. Just for model check, just to check whether our model makes sense. Other studies have shown that total carrying capacity is 980 million metric tons, and the maximum sustained yield possible is 80 to 115 million metric tons per year. And our model, it's lower than the other studies because we have the strict criteria of those species should have ranges available, and not all species have ranges. And that's why, just to be transparent, our model considers lower carrying capacity and lower maximum sustainable yield. And the implication of this is that what we are estimating as a potential benefit of marine protected area network, they're very conservative given that we are considering just few stocks. And if there's huge potential for other stocks, then if you account for that, then our estimate can be much greater. Given that those stocks with no information, they're often stocks that are not well managed or poorly managed. So exciting stuff. This is the result that I have. This is the pixel level food provision. The cyan are the current protected areas. It's 2.5% of the ocean. Imagine a place globally. What if you protect those places? The size of the pixel is 55 by 55 kilometers. It's mole-wide projection already. So if you protect a place anywhere in the planet, what would be the food production potential of that one? And this map shows that. Just to note that this pixel level food provision doesn't care what happened in other areas, and it the amount of food that you can generate from protecting one area also affects the amount of food that you can get from other areas. So it is a complex systems where actions in one area could affect outcomes in other area. But I just want to present the pixel level. I think this is useful for guiding where are the areas where you could expect food improvements when you implement protected area there. In general, areas within close to shore or within exclusive economic zone, you would get 10 times higher food provision benefits than areas in the high seas, which is beyond 200 nautical miles from the coastline. So what does the network of protected area looks like? That is, what I did here is that first protect the pixel that would give you more food, then reevaluate all the other pixels such that the other pixel, the next pixel that will provide you the greatest food, you would pick that or prioritize that and move forward until you pick all the pixels that you arrange all the pixels from more food to less food. And this is what it looks like. The rank 100 is the first pixel that you will choose, and the rank 0 is the least desirable pixel that you will use. The picture is actually very different than the pixel level food provision potential, given that here you account for about interactions among different sites. Imagine a species with a specific geographic range. If you protect already 30% of its range, adding one more pixel, that it means that you're adding the outcome of that pixel, the food provision outcome of that pixel will be different, because other areas, the status of the fishery in other areas affects the status of the fisheries in other areas. So this is what the network of food provision potential looks like. And x-axis here is the percent of ocean protected. Y-axis is the change in catch that you can get. These are arranged from the top priority pixel to less priority. And you can see that the amount of catch that you can get quickly increased up to 10 million metric tons per year. So then if you close the entire world, you would get negative 30 plus million metric tons of fish. What is exciting about this graph is that by just closing 5%, or by just strategically expanding the existing MPA network by 5%, you can get as much as 10 million metric tons of extra food per year. And this is the most conservative estimate that we have. It doesn't account for other unaccounted stock or other fisheries that we don't have data. And most likely, the estimate will be much more bigger. And considering two other realistic scenarios that are published in the literature, you can get 18 million metric tons of food by just expanding the existing network of marine protected area by 5%. And the above curve, it's from the assumption of Worm et al. In Science, and you can get up to 25 million metric tons of food, extra food for a year from implementing just 5% of the ocean, or expand the current network of protected area by 5%. And those are huge food benefits, not accounting for other stocks that we don't have data on. So just to have a clear picture of the story about this fishery and the potential benefits of MPAs for food in the fishery. So x-axis current and future, y-axis is catch. No additional MPA, future catch will be 50 to 70% of the current catch. Then if you just strategically expand the MPAs by 5%, you would get a 23 to 80% improvements in catch. And in the future, you could actually maintain the current catch in the future with just implementing 5% or expanding your current protected area by 5% and choosing the right 5% MPAs. In terms of how much would it cost I mean, those 5%, how much would it cost us to implement those? Well, the benefit, we calculated the benefit, it's 12 to $16 billion per year of extra benefit from the most conservative scenario. So if you strategically expand existing MPAs by 5% and using the most conservative scenario, the benefit gain is 12 to $16 billion per year. And the cost of implementing those 5% MPA is 2.2 to 6 billion US dollars per year. You could see that the benefit is 2 to 8 times more than what would it cost us to implement those MPAs. And that's really a surprising result. So going back to our question, can we design a global network of MPAs that optimizes food provision? Indeed, by just expanding the current MPA network by 5%, you can get a lot of food provision benefits. And what is very exciting about this is that we can actually protect huge amount of ocean at no cost to food provision. That is, you can design this MPA network such that you will not have the trade-off between food and conservation, and that using science innovations to motivate much faster protection of marine biodiversity becomes much more feasible, and I'm very happy about this result. Again, I've shown science innovations that could potentially address problems in overfishing, as well as make marine conservation much more feasible. The first one is the addressing the bottlenecks uh, over to achieving to recovering overfishing, which is that short-term cost. How addressing illegal fishing could potentially allow you to recover much to recover fisheries much more faster or feasible. And the other one is designing MPA networks that would simultaneously improve food provisioning as well as conserve marine biodiversity. I have 2 slides to discuss about the policy impacts of my work. So I published this paper in 2018. Um, and one of our recommendations is that local management reform is necessary. World Bank got that message and they highlighted our work in their report and economic perspective for Indonesia in 2019 and 2018. And just this month, I got a funding from Walton Family Foundation and World Bank to guide them on what are some what so they have money to they have multi-million dollar and they want to invest in Indonesia's management, but they want us to um, tell them where they should invest their money, and that is very I'm very happy with that, given that the work that I do can I'm doing theoretical work, yet there's also an applied aspect to that one. And all the work that I'll do now, I can see some actions on the ground, and that's a great opportunity for me to make a difference within Indonesia, and hopefully that partnership with the World Bank can also be replicated in other places. So they've not we just had a conversation yesterday with the World Bank, and they haven't really done that in fisheries where they would use science to inform their investments. And I'm really happy about that, given that it can be an opportunity for me and for development agencies such as World Bank to make it as a practice of their investments be informed by science and partnership within local government. So for the other work, I'm very excited about that. The food provision aspect, I led that work, and that's currently in revision in PNAS. But we also have this broader work on combining different ecosystem services in the ocean, and it's also under revision in Nature, where we assess the biodiversity values of different ocean areas. This is not, you can see that this is different from a species richness map, where the species richness map highlights only the coral triangle, but this highlights several areas because we accounted for phylogenetic diversity and other things that are important for biodiversity. And also, like some area, like even the IUCN status of the species, and we accounted for those. And we also accounted for we just filter the species that would be affected by the interventions that we are testing. So marine protected area can affect species that are being fished, but some of the species will not respond to MPA. So we were very careful about what to include in our biodiversity layer. Also, so I'm using a different laptop. It may take a while, but I can just explain the remaining slides. There are 3 more additional slides on my plans for the future, and I can just explain it here.
Okay, thanks. No worries. It's fine.
Yeah, so for that CVD, I'm very excited about that. So I've been working with the National Geographic Society for the last 2 years, and we still have a project now. And yeah, so that's one of the work that I'm excited, given that the work that I do into like making the science more careful there, of like food provision benefits, the other types of like biodiversity benefits, that will hopefully help motivate conservation actions. And there are relevant agendas there, or the relevant international fora that will be held soon that could use that information. So the 3 things that I'm excited about in doing there in Colombia, if ever I'll be given a chance or invited to join the faculty. One is
my goal is to all my work would contribute to food security, resilient communities, sustainable development, as well as um, biodiversity conservation. And my work would feed into those four main goals. One of my goals is um, what are the science that we can do to be able to motivate much faster or make fisheries and conservation actions more feasible in several areas. And one thing that one project that I'm interested about is quantifying the benefit of the quantifying the benefit of conservation action within one country and mapping the benefit flows of that. Meaning, if you implement a protected area in Indonesia, fishes, the benefits will not just reside in Indonesia. Other countries will also benefit from that, given that fishes do move. They move to Philippines, they move to Australia, and therefore their conservation actions would also improve biodiversity conservation as well as fisheries in other countries. And that moving forward, building a market out of that, such that if Indonesia, if implementing that conservation actions would benefit other countries, then what are some ways we can do to tap other countries' support to be able to make conservation action within the implementing countries much more feasible? The second one is on the issue of tele, on policy leakage, where in the cases that I do, like the first case, that's the Indonesia case. I just showed you the success story of Indonesia, but some of the fishers there that would want to fish in Indonesia legally, but now can't fish, they need to go elsewhere, and some of them have already been sunk. And um, the question there is that while Indonesia's policy is good for them, maybe it's bad for other places, it's bad for neighboring countries, and that the illegal fishing in other countries are increasing, and that has huge consequences. Um, so I want to formalize that and move that forward, being more transparent on the different, more of a systems dynamics approach, more transparent on the effect of policy on both the fisheries and conservation, and looking at the threat transfer or telecoupling or um, the the leakage problem, both at any system, marine and terrestrial. So the third one is, so it's the same story about like Indonesia and the Gambia. The Gambia, I have a part of my slide is I've shown where those before their policy, Italy, Greece, many of the European countries used to fish in the Gambia illegally. Then after the policy, I have a next slide which shows that they're all gone, but we don't know where they fish now, and that might cause lots of problems in other places. And the third one is on the food systems and climate change. Um, so we have a paper under review, or not under review, but a revision now in Nature, which looks at climate change effects on the ocean ecosystem economy, fisheries, aquaculture, and coral reef tourism, and how that affects food and livelihood security at the country level. More of a checking or looking at which countries, what ecosystem would be negatively affected, and potentially looking at what other, maybe they can offset that losses with gains in other sectors, and look at what are some adaptation options at the country level. Should they invest more in other options that we think that would gain from climate change, or they should, if all their sectors would be heavily impacted by climate change negatively, then what are some of the actions they can take? Moving forward, I'm excited to merge that with terrestrial. It has never been done before. More of a holistic view of the food system. You have marine, you have terrestrial, degradation in marine environment. How would the supply and demand would change? And I think it's just fitting to, if we are talking about climate change and how that affects food and livelihood security, we should look at the problem more holistically. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Ren, and thank you for your being so calm and collected when you had to not have your slides in front of you. Okay, so we can open up to questions, and if everyone can use the raise hand button. Does everybody know how to do that? And I'll try to call on people in order. Okay, starting with our tradition of having students ask the first question. I'm Sebastian.
Hey, Ren, thank you so much for this talk. So most of these fisheries are generating economic activity, and the idea is that this food then trickles down. So I'm wondering if increased biomass always increases or equals an increase in food security. And what about the economic benefits, especially since stopping these industrial fisheries tends to increase the amount of subsistence fisheries that people can actually use.
So your first question on increasing biomass would increase food security. I think it's true that it will improve food security because there's more food available. But whether that will be sufficient for the food security of the people, that's another question. And if we are strict about it, food security is a complex definition. It's not just the availability of food; it's also the quality of food and the accessibility. And I haven't assessed that in I've worked on that before, but I haven't assessed that in this work. So when you implement a management action, what are the species that would recover? Are they nutritious? Would they be eaten by people, or maybe some of the fisheries that we will recover are for exports, and therefore it will be money for the people. Yet they will use that money to buy other goods that are not nutritious, and therefore the question of food security is a complex one. But loosely speaking, improvement in biomass means there's more catch. And there are other ecosystem services that we haven't accounted for, like tourism benefits. More biomass in the sea means snorkelers would be more happy to dive or to snorkel in areas where you have lots of fishes. And there are other ecosystem functions that those fishes perform that are not monetized and potentially would also be important here. Your second question is on big vessels. Can you repeat that?
No, it was more about the biomass, whether that also translates to increased revenue. Because I imagine that some species come at different costs and where that money goes to.
Yeah. So generally, increase in biomass can increase revenue, but again, it depends on what species would respond to your protection, whether or your management intervention. If they're high value species, and you can target that, meaning your policy intervention, you should match that with your goals. Your goal is to improve the catch of tuna, and that is really a high valuable species, and therefore increasing the biomass of that allows you to catch more fish. So yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Duncan.
All right, really nice talk, Ryan. It was a lot of fun to see all that stuff put together. The question is about the graph of carrying capacity that you showed. It was really interesting to see a global graph of carrying capacity. I'm curious to know more about what definition of carrying capacity you use, because to some people that means for a single species. For some people it means all fish. It could mean all fish that people eat. It could mean absence of any top-down control, or it's not even clear what that means in the context of multiple species together. So my first question is, what definition of carrying capacity is? And the second one is, how do you actually go about estimating that?
Wonderful question, and that is also the question of the reviewer. What is that carrying capacity?
So I'm not the reviewer, by the way.
So I think that's a wonderful question. So we considered close to 1,400 stocks, and that carrying capacity is just for that stock. And that carrying capacity is also based on catch, meaning what we catch now. We use that catch information to be able to infer how much is the carrying capacity of that fish. And using their geographic range, we distribute that depending on on the geographic range of the species and the probability of the species being there in the geographic in the area, and therefore it's a combination of several species, and the carrying capacity map that you've seen is a superposition of all the commercially important species. It is, I think, underestimating the total carrying capacity, both in terms of the number of species, because there are other species out there, and the other one is that already accounts implicitly the pressures that those environmental pressures that those fishes have experienced. So removing all the pressures, potentially they can be more biomass, like the K will be much bigger. And there's a good study in that one. They compared carrying capacity near shore versus those that are remote area, and the carrying capacity can be double in remote area given that there's no other factors that are influencing the population. So the carrying capacity that I've shown already accounted for the pressures from exerted by humans in those stocks, and those are based in on catch data. What we are missing, and this is difficult now, is the interactions among species. They're not accounted for explicitly in that carrying capacity map, but they're not accounted for explicitly, but accounted for implicitly, because you can't harvest that amount of fish without that interactions being accounted for, and therefore that's one of the uncertainty in the model, given that interactions are not among species are not explicitly being modeled.
Thanks.
Sarah.
Hi, thanks, Ren. That was super interesting.
Thanks.
Early on in the talk, you talked about a 10-year kind of lag time between getting the benefits, an MPA being established and the benefits of that MPA. And I wonder how you foresee if it was a perfect world and you could tell the world where to put MPAs in, would you put them all in at once, or how would you actually implement this? If you could say, this is what we need to do for the oceans right now.
Well, yeah, if we can implement it at once, fantastic. I think it will really, as you wait, there are lots of other pressures and threats and uses in the ocean that will be there, and therefore it will be more difficult for you to implement those protected areas. So if you can implement it now, better. But of course, one of the things that has not been accounted for is that as you implement those protected area, then the value of the places can be will be very different, and that I haven't accounted for that yet. In terms of making that a reality, so I'm really positive and happy that there are several support to making that possible. The WIS Foundation, for example, last year donated $1 billion to be able to for those protected areas to be realized. So the National Geographic Society that I work on, they have this funding for communicating with different governments to have this protected area be established, given the importance of them for food and livelihoods and human well-being, and that it's also fortunate for me to work with Nat Geo and other things, given that all the work that I do will be aligned with or will be used in the effort. I don't know if I answer your question fully, Sarah, or if I can give more clarifications.
No, I think that answered it. Quick follow-up. How much data was in that model, and how quickly would it make my computer explode if I tried to run that data?
Yeah.
You don't actually have to answer that. It's okay.
So when I ran the model first, it took me 20 days. But now with making it more efficient, we can do it in 15 minutes.
Wow. Thank you.
But we are running that in Google Cloud Computing. My computer can handle that. We have partnership with Google, and they provided us funding to be able to run all those codes in Google Machine Engine. And those are really quick computers. Like they're fast. That's why we were able to run it for 15 minutes. And to be able to do that, we need to do several of the, like, in computation, sometimes you would make that assumption, but you can also express that mathematically and simplify that, and you get the same answer. So a lot of that happened to be able to allow us to run that in 15 minutes.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Sarah Brenner.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for the chat. This is kind of a basic question, maybe, but I was wondering, you mentioned that the illegal fishing that had been in Indonesia and the Gambia, for example, might actually be going to a different location when restrictions were imposed. And I was wondering what was kind of driving the illegal fishing. Do you have a sense if it's the demand side or the supply side that's driving that fishing?
Demand. I think it demand or supply. So there's demand for fish. That's why they're fishing. They can get profit out of it. That's why they're doing their illegal fishing. And one aspect that we are looking at is also potential human rights violation in the ocean, and that is also a work that that I'm involved in, and that paper is also currently under review. And more of a quantifying human rights in the ocean, and what drives those behavior in this behavior is that money. They can profit out of it, and there are nations with like not strict or lax governance, and therefore they can fish in those nations. You actually see where they fish, African nation and Pacific islands, because those islands don't have enforcement capacity or lack enforcement capacity, and therefore that allows them to fish illegally in those settings. So from a modeling perspective, it's more of a you have the risk of being caught, the penalty that you would impose in being caught, and what are the potential gains that you can get. And my sense is that what drives them is like, oh, the risk is low and there's huge potential money that you can get from there, then therefore they're doing illegal fishing. So I think it's economics.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jay.
Yeah, thanks so much for that talk, man. It was really, really interesting. I also had a question about like the leakage and spillover, like Sarah was talking about. Have you or has anyone else done kind of a first pass to look at quantifying that in other areas? It seems to me you could just do the same analysis you did in Indonesia or in the Gambia, and just do it at neighboring countries and just see if there was a huge spike where it dropped off in the focal countries you looked at.
Yeah, I did an initial analysis on the Gambia. I tracked fishing vessels. Then when they implemented the policy, I checked where the vessels go, and they went to neighboring countries, and all their fishing effort is within the neighboring countries. I haven't published that yet, and hopefully I can work with that again. But I think that's the motivation for this project, into looking at how those fishing efforts would be transferred, or how the threats would be transferred to other places. And it's not just countries closing their borders, but rather even protected area. We need to quantify those, and we have data for. I mean, we have almost real-time data for tracking how the vessel would respond. But I think to answer your question, I think we need more a formal treatment of that. What's the theory behind it, and use those case studies to be able to show that policy leakage matters. What will be the effect of those leakages if we ignore it? And those case studies would definitely support the theory that we developed. But to answer your question, we haven't done that yet, and there's opportunity for us to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt.
Hey, Ren. Thanks for the talk. Following on those last two, I was also thinking about when an illegal fisher gets shut down, if there's someplace else to go, they're going to go there because it's a path of least resistance. But as more and more countries did this, there are, these illegal fishers have a livelihood to maintain, and I don't know. I'm curious, how much does institutional strength matter? Because can they eventually bribe local officials? Are there ways for them to change their approach? And if this scaled up, say all the countries followed the path of Indonesia and Gambia, do you think there'd just be a lot less illegal fishing, or do you think they just come up with other ways to do it?
That's a complex system question and complex question. I don't know the answer. Probably of course they will exert huge effort and huge. Um, I think it will be catastrophic for other countries that are potentially have weak governance, yet would allow illegal fishing in their waters. So it may be good for other countries that are implementing strong actions against illegal fishing. But I really don't know what will that entail if several actions will take this step. Will there be enough countries with no strong governance that those illegal fishing will just take advantage of? And maybe that's the likely scenario that many countries will suffer from strong actions from other countries, and that there are related interventions out there that start thinking about that, like the port state measure, where it's a global initiative where they would check vessels at the port level, and several countries are signatories of that one, and they encourage lots of ports to be member of that, such that those ports or those harbors will be clean of illegal fishing. But I'm still worried about like the potential effects of the amount of illegal fishing that will happen in other places. So I don't know what will be the future will look like if that will be the case.
So I'm going to follow up with a question about the illegal fishing, and then Duncan, go to your question. So is it possible that the illegal fishing is contributing to food security for some people somewhere? I mean, somebody must be eating those fish. Is it people who depend on those fish, or is it just rich people somewhere who don't really need the fish? Is there some kind of unintended consequence of sinking those illegal boats?
Excellent question. So it's easy for Indonesia because most of their illegal fishing pressure, they're from foreign boats, and therefore they can implement actions that would allow them to kick out those illegal vessels, and therefore they can maintain their own food security. But there are cases where the illegal fishing, they're from the local community, and that is a difficult question, given that you can't just kick out that illegal fishing or illegal fisher, given that it's also contributing to food security. Yet that action is actually like a tragedy of the common. Like others are affected by that action of a single or a few people, and addressing that is different. I've seen some strategies like a development agency would go to a place, they would identify the community knows who are the illegal fishers, and I can attest to that one from talking with fishers. They know who are the illegal fishers, and development agencies would just a strategy that I saw in the field is that they would hire those illegal fishers to be the enforcer of marine protected area, and therefore they reduce the amount of illegal fishing, yeah, and also allow the fisheries to recover, and that can be one of the solution if local solution, like hiring those illegal fisheries to be able to prevent them from doing their illegal acts, and that will have a good public good. There are potentially several strategies to addressing local illegal fishing, such that the outcome will be more equitable for different people.
Okay, thanks. Duncan.
Yeah, thanks again. So one of the really exciting things about working in this area is that the work you're doing is immediately applicable to what people are doing and to people's livelihoods. So people who are working in areas like that could do straight science. They could go all the way and do straight communication with science, or they could do something in between those. What do you see as your role both now and in the future on that axis of doing the science to communicating science?
Yeah, so thanks, Duncan, for that question. So I am really interested in science and science innovations, where it can address bottlenecks to effectively addressing fisheries and conservation problems. and that involves advancing the ideas, the theory, and what are some innovations we can make to solve some of the biggest problems. And bigger, I think I will play a huge role in that film, advancing the theory and making innovations in for many people to use those findings that I made to advance both the practice in the field and also advance the practice globally. My role will be doing the research as well as thinking creatively, getting big ideas out there, and thinking of ways that we can solve these big challenges. And I also maintain huge connection or strong connection with partners on the ground and the government agencies and development agencies that do the work at the local level. And I appreciate that, given that sometimes your science will get lost, but here there's an opportunity for me to actually inform decisions on the ground. And my role will be to make sure that the science that I make would be translated accurately on the ground. That I think very important, given that sometimes your science can be, they can use it like there's loss in translation there. And I think my role is more of a making sure that the tools that I make and the findings that I make, I communicate that with the partners on the ground, and the partners on the ground can hopefully implement that and make a difference, like on the ground. And more of a it also saves or more efficient for our time. I can't be in many places all the time. All I can do is make sure that the science that I make would address issues and problems that are relevant locally as well as in other places.
Yeah. Okay. Any last questions? Anyone? Going, gone. Well, Ren, thank you so much. It was a very, very interesting and relevant talk. So, and thank you for bearing with these non-ideal conditions. And this is the time we would go out into the lobby and have cheese and beer and wine, but unfortunately we can't offer you a beer. So we'll give you a rain check for that. And let's all, I'm gonna unmute everyone so that we can all thank Ren for the talk.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to everyone.
Thank you.
We enjoyed the interview.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.